Have you ever had trouble paying a debt or been accused of having a debt that was not yours? We'll talk about zombie debts, debts that never die, right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of West Virginia Attorney General Darrell McGraw and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
Debt collection can be a difficult and sometimes unfair business. My guests are attorneys Norman Gugel, Senior West Virginia Assistant Attorney General, and Matthew Stonestreet, West Virginia Assistant Attorney General. Norman, Matt, thanks for coming back. You've been here before.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you, Dan.
What kind of problems are West Virginians having with debt collections?
Where do we start?
Right now, let's just start here.
I think, so, you know, just to set the stage a little bit, you have a woman who ends up with a lien on her home and has never even had a credit card. And she's sued on credit card debt and ends up with a lien on her home. You have a veteran who's a victim of identity theft. The bank says, sure, you're a victim of identity theft. They get rid of the credit card charges. Somehow it ends up on the debt market. He's sued and ends up getting wage garnishments. Something like that is happening not just in West Virginia, but across the United States every single day.
Well, there's so many different issues there to talk about. When we say identity theft, what are we talking about?
Someone would steal that credit card, put fraudulent charges on it, and then he would report it. It would be taken off. Somehow that account still ends up on the debt market, and he's sued, and a wage garnishment results.
Okay, so as an example, I would have a credit card. Someone would gain access to either that credit card or the information on the credit card, and boy, there are lots of ways to do that, and run up a debt in my name that I never incurred. I would complain to the bank that this is not my debt, and the bank would agree with me, write it off, everything would look fine, and then the bank would sell the debt anyway?
Yes, and that's happened. It gets packaged in a very large debt portfolio. It's sold on the debt market. Debt buying in the United States today is a $100 billion industry. And a big new modern part of the developments in this is turning unsecure, largely credit card debt. Some of the debt could be a repossession deficiency and other forms of debt, but by and large it is credit card debt. It's sold to debt buyers, and the new tactic is to go into small claims court, to go into magistrate court and sometimes even circuit court and sue individuals for those accounts. Over 90% of those judgments are default judgments. People don't even show up. You get something in the mail that says, you know, you're a victim of identity theft or was discharged in bankruptcy, and you get something in the mail that says you're being sued for this debt. Most people think this is ridiculous. This can't be happening in the modern justice system today, but it is, and they end up with a secure debt, a lien on their home, or a wage garnishment. And I mean, you know, this kind of stuff is happening all over America. We've sued businesses and debt buyers and debt collectors who have done activities just like that, and it's something that continues today.
When you say we, you're talking about the Attorney General's office.
Yes.
Well, I can envision a situation, because I'm kind of having this problem now. I pulled my credit report off experience records recently because you folks have taught me that I should check my credit report every once in a while. And I found that there was a claim that in the state of North Carolina, I subscribed to CenturyLink cable, apparently. I've never been in North Carolina to do more than buy gas to drive out of North Carolina. Nice place, I've just never been there. But they said I owed $67 to CenturyLink. I've never been there, I've never done business with CenturyLink, but they say I own $67. Now, they could very easily, if they thought I lived in North Carolina, sued me in a North Carolina court at an address that I've never had because they have an address for me there, get a judgment for $67 because I never knew about the lawsuit, and then proceed to try to enforce the judgment.
They can do it.
No, that happens.
That's not right.
No, I mean there's all kinds of moral, ethical, legal, and economic interests that are competing in this industry.
Well, historically, I mean, there always have been issues with debt collection, and as a result, I think it was back in the 70s, a law called the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act was passed to set some rules of the road. But in the beginning, the debts being collected were mostly legitimate debts. Now, we still have a lot of misbehavior in collecting debts, but we have this whole new thing where a lot of the debts never even were legitimate in the first place. And even with legitimate debts, after somebody pays them, that may not be the end of it, and they still get abused and harassed. And a lot of what has brought this about is sort of the onset of the computer age and electronics, and all this data is being instantaneously passed all around the country. It is hard to make it go away. Once somebody somewhere thinks you owe a debt, it's hard to make it go.
But if I paid the debt, for example, why wouldn't that be the end of it?
Well, you can send proof to somebody that you paid it, and you think, well, this is going to be so simple. I just sent them, here's my canceled check, but nobody's even looking at it. It's so impersonal. It's so electronic.
We're talking about debt collectors. My guests are attorneys Norman Gugel, Senior West Virginia Assistant Attorney General, and Matthew Stonestreet, West Virginia Assistant Attorney General. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. I had an interesting situation. One of my kids had some student loans, and he was paying religiously on the student loans until the servicing company came back one day and said, "You didn't pay last month." Well, he had paid last month. I knew he had paid last month because, like many other Americans, Dad's paying the student loans.
The check.
So I looked at my bank records, went online, and my bank's very good about having everything online, including images of the check. And I looked at the image of the check and said, yep, there's the check. Looked at the backside image, yep, it was negotiated. So I called the loan servicer and said, I paid that, it's not past due, I have an image of the check right here. And they said, send us the canceled check. And I said, well, I can't send you the canceled check because when you receive it, you electronify it. And you scan it, you send it to my bank, the bank pays you, and all there is an image. And the response was, send us the canceled check. I said, there is no canceled check. You choose to not send the check to my bank so they can return it to me. Send us the canceled check. I made the payment again, just to get them off my bank. It was $240.
You have to make the principled stand there.
Well, yes, I should have. I should have. Because I have found from experience that nothing is quite so effective as to have someone in the consumer protection division to call a company and say, for example, I'm Norman Gugel, I'm a senior assistant West Virginia Attorney General, and some problems, not all problems, some problems do get resolved like that. But to me, it was easier to make the payment again to avoid the hassle of all of this. And that points up the issue that even if the debt has been paid, someone can come back and claim that it hasn't been and ask to collect it again. We are a nation of, 300 million people. A very small percentage of those people will pay the payment again, us foolish ones perhaps, but they will make millions and millions and millions of dollars.
I mean,
just by doing that.
You know, what you're talking about, that's the reason it's a $100 billion industry. And you use the phrase, the debt that never dies. I mean, that's unfortunately accurate. Even if people pay it, even if it's been discharged in bankruptcy, even if it's the result of fraud, you're talking about debt that can sometimes go downstream. And what I mean downstream is the bank writes it off, sells it to a debt collector. That debt collector, all they have is a data stream, a spreadsheet with names. It's not even accurate. In the asset agreement for transfer, they actually say in a lot of these agreements, we don't warrant any of the information we gave you for accuracy, reliability, or truthness. All of these accounts, that's what the asset...
The business who is selling the debt says, we're not claiming this is a real debt, but here, you can have it anyway.
And if you think about it, when the purchase price is 1.7 cents, 2 cents, I mean, you get what you pay for it. There's a reason this stuff. Wait, it's 2 cents is because it's junk. It is junk debt, and it ends up in the market, and it's there, like you're saying, and it's the debt that doesn't die.
You mean they may have a debt of tens, hundreds, or even thousands of dollars, and they're getting prices for that like 2 cents or a nickel or something?
They range in between, industry averages are in between 3 and 7 cents. I've seen some as low as 1.7 cents on the dollar for the debt that you're buying. So you're talking about a huge margin for the debt industry there. If they just collect 4 or 5% of these debts, they've doubled their money. I mean, they've made an incredible amount of money by this very small investment in junk debt portfolios. And the ones they can't collect, they just push them further downstream. And that's how you end up with errors where people who have already paid debts, people where it's discharged in bankruptcy, people where it's beyond the statute of limitations, they're being called up and they're being told outrageous things like, we're going to have you arrested, we're going to sue you, we're at the courthouse right now with your family. I mean, we've gotten incredible reports on things. It's really just bizarre. They say, we're at the courthouse with your family. They think you're a deadbeat. I mean, and then another scenario where they're calling people at work, they'll call your neighbors up. I mean, there are some aggressive tactics in collecting this debt, and that's because there's a lot of money to be made.
But these things are all against the law.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely are against the law. I mean, the debt industry today really is the Wild West. It really is.
In fact, one of the, and most, what we've been talking about, as bad as it is, generally involves companies that actually have an office somewhere we can actually find them and sue them and try to give them an attitude adjustment. But
that's a legal term.
But there's some gigantic scams going on now, which have largely, it's mostly happening in the internet payday lending industry, where people apply for a loan and they never even get the loan. But when you apply for a loan on the internet, somebody's capturing that information. And a lot of that's being captured by bad guys, and then they decide, they call you up and start making horrific threats that if you don't pay this money, you're going to be arrested, all these horrible things that Matt was talking about, when there never was a debt. But the threats are so scary, and people call us, they're literally crying on the phone, and I'll spend 10 minutes explaining to them, this is a scam, this is a scam. Do you understand what a scam is? And if they say yes, well, what does it mean? Well, you mean all that stuff is not true? That's right. But as you decided, Dan, to make that one payment to get them off your back, these people will pay money to strangers that they know they don't owe because they're so afraid that they're going to be arrested. And these companies are making millions and millions of dollars. And I will say, to the credit of the legitimate debt collection industry, they are as concerned about that as we are, because those scams have become so prevalent that some people are afraid to pay money to any collection agency. There's such a mistrust because there has been so much fraud going on out there.
Well, I talk about my problems, and I've had a couple, and I knew what to do about them. Apparently I screwed up one case, but because I'm a lawyer. What do ordinary people do? What do plumbers do, housewives do, nurses do, school teachers, cab drivers? How can they possibly live in a world like that?
Well, they get scared, and I just wish, and I want people to really listen, when you get these kind of calls, please call us first. Do not give strangers calling you over the phone permission to take money out of your account, even if you think it's a legitimate debt. It may be a legitimate debt, but maybe the one trying to collect it is not legitimate. Call us first when you get those kind of calls. Don't give them your money. You don't have to pay a debt that you know you don't owe to make them leave you alone. We will take care of that.
The West Virginia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division really is out there. And notwithstanding the old joke about, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, which is a warning, not an offer of help, there is help available. You can contact the West Virginia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division at www.wvago.gov. wvago.gov. And that simply stands for West Virginia Attorney General's Office.gov. Or you can call the Attorney General's office at 1-800-368-8808. 800-368-8808. Now, you can't respond directly and aggressively to every single phone call. Or can you?
We do the best we can. We actually have an attorney on call every day of the week, which I don't know of any other AG office in the country that has that. And that's very important to us. And we get a lot of calls every day about these debt collection abuses. And sometimes when we'll get a call like that, we will immediately begin an investigation. If it's a company we're not familiar with, we'll call them up with the consumer on the phone and say, who are you? What's your address? And then the consumers see, well, they won't give us their address. How much does this consumer owe? When did they get this debt? They can't even tell us that. And we demonstrate that to the consumer to say, look, this is just a scam. We just wanted you to see that. All these threats they made, they're not making the threats now.
We're talking about debt collectors. My guests are attorneys Norman Gugel, Senior West Virginia Assistant Attorney General, and Matthew Stonestreet, West Virginia Assistant Attorney General. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works.
So we can't do them all, Dan, but we do a heck of a lot. We do as much as is humanly possible to stop this stuff.
Well, when you do identify somebody that's a real problem and you're getting lots of complaints, you can do more than just call them up.
Absolutely.
What do you do?
What
have you done?
Well, I mean, now might be a good time to talk about.
Sure.
I think we were talking about this and crunched some numbers in the past. Just in the past 3.5 months, through settlements and lawsuits, the West Virginia Attorney General's office under McGraw has gotten more than $6 million in debt cancellation.
In the last how many months?
In the past 3.5 months in West Virginia, through lawsuits and settlements, it's more than $6 million in debt relief for West Virginians.
You said McGraw, that's Attorney General Darryl McGraw.
Yes.
And one of the things that's important when we're able to get a settlement with a collection agency, it's not enough if they say, well, we're going to close our file and we won't try to collect this anymore. The debt in that case will stay on their credit report and maybe be sold to somebody else. We insist that that debt be deleted from their credit report, that they close the account with a zero balance.
Can they do that?
And delete it.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They delete the negative credit line, they cancel the debt. I mean, we want to end it once and for all. Maybe we're the ones that can get the zombie debt.
So if it's possible to make the debt finally die, that's our goal in a settlement. Mm-hmm. We really want it to die.
What should consumers do? You talked about the woman who owned her home, there were no liens on the home, she'd never had a credit card, and all of a sudden she's inundated with these collection activities. From the time she's first notified of something, what should she do?
Well, in that case, they did traditional collections, but what they ended up doing was suing her. And her thought was, I've never had a credit card, I'm not going to argue about this in court, they'll never get a judgment. And you're an attorney, what happens when you don't show up? It's a default judgment. Over 90% of these small debt, junk debt lawsuits, over 90% of them are default judgments, which is a huge problem. And I mean, and that's why it's important to tell people on here that if you get sued on a debt and you don't think you owed it, just go, show up to court, tell the judge. Because if you're not there, sometimes it's difficult to do anything. They'll get those default judgments, especially in an industry that is so rampant with error and abuse. You're familiar with the robo affidavits in the mortgage industry. The very same thing happens in the debt industry. They have an affidavit that says, I promise this person owes a debt. And who signed that affidavit? Someone that sat there all day and signed hundreds, sometimes thousands of affidavits. They have no idea whether this debt is valid or not. Sometimes it went downstream 4 or 5 times. So what you're ending up with is they go into court, they don't have evidence, they have this robo affidavit. People don't show up because they don't think in their wildest dreams anything like this could happen. I've never even had a credit card. Why do I have to go dispute this? And then they're turning junk debt that's unsecure into secured wage garnishments and liens.
When a lawsuit is filed in any court, magistrate court, circuit court, federal court, state court, it doesn't make any difference. A lawsuit is filed against a person. That person is expected by the law to come to court and say, yes, it's a fair lawsuit, I owe the money, or no, I don't owe the money. The simplest thing for you to do if you are sued is to go to court and say, Judge, let me see the proof that I owe this money. And the judge will turn to the other side and say, where's the proof? And if a debt has been sold a couple or 3 times, there is never any proof.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And a lot of people don't understand when they're sued and they get the paper called the summons, it says, you must file a written answer with the court. If you don't file a written answer within 20 days saying, I don't owe the debt or I dispute it, you're never going to get a chance to go to court. They'll never send you a notice of a hearing. It'll end up in the default judgment that Matt was talking about.
If you don't go, it is presumed by the law that you are admitting what has been said in the complaint. Now, one of the things that I have always complained about, I've talked to circuit clerks, I've talked to Supreme Court justices, I've talked to circuit judges, is the paper that we in West Virginia put on top of the complaint simply says you must make response within 20 days typically, sometimes 30 days. And it doesn't tell you what that means. It just says make response. And I have seen situations where someone who has been sued will simply pick up the phone and call the lawyer or the name on that summons and say, I don't owe this. Now, technically, that lawyer or the secretary that answered the phone is supposed to notify the court that he or she received an oral denial, but many times they don't. In fact, many times when you're sued, if you look at it very closely, there really isn't even anybody in West Virginia that you could call. You'd have to call someplace out of state. There are rules about that. That can happen. But you have to take an action in response. And the problem with that is you really ought to have a lawyer.
That's right.
But lawyers are expensive. And somebody says, Matt, you owe me $600. You're probably not going to be able to hire a lawyer for less than $600 to dispute this thing. You might be able to, but it's probably not going to happen.
I mean, it's a real problem in the judicial system. I don't think anyone ever anticipated a glut of false evidence lawsuits on debt, on junk debt.
Or even no evidence lawsuits.
Or yeah, that's probably a better way to put it. No evidence lawsuits in court where over 90% of them are default judgments. I mean, can you imagine if you got to litigate a case like that? If you got to say, you know what, 90% of the time when I sue someone, I know they're not going to show up, and I can just make a fake affidavit and say, they're guilty of everything I alleged, I promise, Dan Ringer, and put it on there. That'd be the easiest way to practice law in the world.
Well, some lawyers have been caught doing that sort of thing. They have mills where they receive the computer files. They simply print out the complaint, send it in, and then have a robo-signed affidavit from somebody, maybe even somebody in their office, and you send that in and you get the judgment, and if you collect on 90% of them,
you've made a pretty good payday.
You've done very well.
And what I have learned is many of the judges in our courts are very frustrated with this because some informal studies have shown that as much as 60 or 70% of all new suits being filed, not just in West Virginia, but all over the country, are not just debt collection suits, but suits being filed by debt buyers that don't even have proof of the debt. And the judges would like to be able to be of more help. They see all these default judgments being entered. And so some judges are fighting back, so to speak, and forcing debt buyers to prove the debt is owed even when the consumer hasn't answered.
But that's really beyond the role of the judge. The judge is supposed to be objective and not favor one side or another. If you are having problems with debts that you don't owe, that you're being hounded unfairly or unlawfully, contact the West Virginia Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division at 1-800-368-8808. Norman, Matthew, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law.
The LawWorks is made possible by major grants from the Office of West Virginia Attorney General Darrell McGraw and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. Additional support for the LawWorks is provided by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.